Om Badram Karanebihi Shrunyamadevaha Badram Pashyem Akshabihi Ryajatraha Sthirairangair Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Vyashema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swastinah Indro Vridrashravaha Swastinah Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinah Tarksho Arishtanebihi Swastino Bruhaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रक्षुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांस्तहस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to folks who have joined for the 28th session of Atharvana Upanishad, which is also called Mundaka Upanishad. So we are almost coming to the tail end of this particular khanda. But where are we? We are in the Dvitiya Mundaka at this point, Prathama Khandaha. So before we start, let's think about all the rishis. Starting from Hayagriva Namaka Paramatma, Chaturmukha, Atharva, Angira, Satyavaha, Angirasa, Shuanaka, and all the acharyas who have given us an insight into what is the key message of this Upanishad. The Devata is Akshara Namaka Paramatma, and the Chandas, of course, is Anishtu primarily. Okay, so let's just run through these verses. Tadetat satyam yata sudiptat pavakat vishvulingaha sahasrashaha prabhavante sarupaha tata aksharat vividaha somya bhavaha prajayante tatra chaiva apiyanti. Divyo hi amurtaha purushaha sabahyapi antaro hi ajaha aprano hi manaha shubro hi aksharat paratah paraha. Yetasmat jayate prano manaha sarva indriyani cha Kham Vayur Jyotir Apaha Prithvi Vishwasya Dharini Agnir Murda Chakshushi Chandra Suryo Dishaha Shrotre Vag Vivrutashta Vedaha Vayuhu Prane Hrudayam Vishwam Asya Padbyam Prithvi Hi Esha Sarva Bhutantaratma Tasmad Agnihi Samido Yasya Suryaha Somat Parjanyaha Voshadayaha Prithvyam Puman Retas Sinjati Yoshitayam Bahvi Prajaha Purushat Samprasutaha Tasmad Ruchaha Sama Yajumshi Dikshaha Yajnashta Sarve Kratavo Dakshinashta Samvatsarashta Yajamanashta Lokaha Somo Yatra Pavate Yatra Suryaha Tasmacha Deva Bahuda Samprasutaha Sadhyaha Manushyaha Pashavo Vayamsi Prana Apano Vrihi Yavo Tapashcha Shraddha Satyam Brahmacharyam Vidishta Sapta pranaha prabhavanti tasmat sapta archishaha samidaha sapta homaha sapta ime lokaha yeshu charanti pranaha guhashaya nihitaha sapta sapta ata samudrad girayashta sarve asmat sandante sindavaha sarvarupaha atashta sarva oshadayaha rasashta yenashta bhutaish tishtate hi antara atma Purusha eva idam viswam karma tapo brahma paramrutam yetad yo veda nihitam guhayam so avidya grantim vikirati iha somya. So beautiful verses, 10 verses. So we've recited 10 verses, but just to remind us, we are in the 9th verse. Last week we did Sapta Pranaha, all the Indriyas, and then we also touched upon all the oceans and so on. So what is the primary focus of this particular khanda? He is talking about creatorship of Brahman in all its forms and dimensions. Okay. So this creation that Paramatma has done has to be real. If there's so much of details that has been given by Angirasa, yeah. So that is the first thing that we understand here. There's all the various sequence of jivas, jadas, and how the Abhimani devatas are coming and so on is all discussed by Angirasa in this. If it was some kind of an imaginary illusion of creation, there is no need for Angirasa or Chaturmukha to Atharva to give all the sequence of creation. Yeah. So this itself is a proof that creation is real. Okay. And the evolution is real. The sequence of evolute is real, at least from Angirasa's perspective and Atharva Veda's perspective. And of course, our Veda Vyasa has defined in the second sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha. And Jayatirtha in his work said, Janmadhyasya Yataha iti Bhagavata Sutrakarena Jagat Udayadi Nimitta Karanatvam Parasya Brahmano Lakshanam. Nacha Jagat Satyata Mantarena Tad Vastavam Sambhavati. It's a very, very important statement of Jayatirtha. We said, Veda Vyasa had said, Janmadhyasya Yataha. All the Upanishads are talking about the creatorship of the Brahman of the universe. All these are saying has to imply that this creatorship is real. Otherwise, our founding father Veda Vyasa is not going to be saying Janmadhyasya Yataha, who is the creator of the universe. So it's a very critical philosophical point that we have to understand when we look at this particular Khanda of Atharva Veda. So what did we do last week? Sapta pranaha prabhavanti tasmat sapta archishaha samida sapta homaha sapta ime lokaha yeshu charanti pranaha guhashaya nihitaha sapta sapta. So we looked at this beautiful verse that talks about the concepts of seven in philosophy. And what I've tried to do is I've kind of summarized all the sevens that we have dealt with in the various Upanishads and in the Purusha Sukta and so on, and including the Mundaka Upanishad. So, seven pranas here means what? Seven indriyas. The seven indriyas also was created by Paramatma. The seven indriyas, when they come in contact with a sense object, they generate knowledge. That knowledge is the archis. Yeah, fire is a symbol of knowledge and purity. So, you get a pure knowledge when there is nirdosha artha indriya sannikarsham pratyaksham, as Acharya has said, about what is perceptual knowledge. Pure knowledge, or the archihi that you get, is when there is a defectless contact between sense organs and the sense objects. So seven archis denotes the seven types of knowledge that comes from these contacts between the indriyas and the respective objects. Then, of course, the seven objects which have been described as samidhis, samit, in this particular Upanishad. The contact between the indriyas and the objects is the homa, is the havan that is going on. And that seven, there are seven homas. Who is doing this homa? This homa is being done not by us. If we think we are doing this homa, that will be our downfall, because we are dependent beings. We just can't do anything, to be honest. So these homas are done by all the Abhimani Devatas who are there in the Pindanda, and they are doing this homa as a dedication to Paramatma, who is not only is an Antaryamin in us, but he is also an Antaryamin in all the Abhimani Devatas. Okay. Yajnena yajnam ayajanta devaha, as Purusha Sukta says. During the creation, the devas do this yajna as a dedication to Paramatma. And similarly in Pindanda, the devatas, the Abhimani devatas, do this homa for our benefit so that we get the knowledge. Okay. These indriyas, of course, are there in specific stations, right? In the Pindanda, they are in specific stations. The Abhimani devatas also have the specific stations in Brahmanda. So the seven stations was also created by Paramatma. Then, of course, Angirasa in the subsequent verse, Ataha Samudrad Girayashta Sarve Asmad Sandante Sindavaha Sarvarupaha Atashta Sarva Oshadayo Rasashta Yenaisha Bhutair Tishtatehi Antaratma. We have done the first three lines here. So that is talking about was seven oceans, seven mountains, seven rivers. All, they just didn't appear just like that. They were all created by Paramatma. Then, of course, when we looked at the oceans, samudras, we also thought about the chakras, seven chakras. You may ask, where did the chakras come from? It was also created by Paramatma. The seven rays of the sun, the seven colors of fire, the seven borders of Agni Kunda, which Shuanaka is very good at, seven chandas, by which all these Vedic mantras are recited when you are doing Havan, when you're doing the Vedic yajna. The seven dhatus, that is the seven layers that covers your soul of your body, the seven ductless glands, all these stuff, they just did not happen out of the blue. Okay? Some of our materialistic friends want us to believe that these just happen spontaneously. They can hold on to their ideas to themselves. We are very clear from the Vedic perspective that for anything to emanate, there needs to be a sentient principle behind it. Okay. So that sentient principle alone is responsible, and this sentient principle alone can bring about evolution of non-sentient things. Yeah. Janmadhyasya yataha, said our Veda Vyasa. And I also want to remind you here, there is in the fourth adhyaya, Fourth pada, 17th Sutra, Jagat Vyapara Varjam. Okay, so these two are some of the most important sutras of Veda Vyasa. Janmadhyasya Yataha Jagat Vyapara Varjam. He creates the universe and all the affairs of the universe. Vyapara, Jagat's Vyapara. He is the only person who can do it, and nobody else has declared Veda Vyasa, who is, of course, the incarnation of Narayana himself. Okay, so there can be no doubts here. Anything that we see in the universe comes from Paramatma. Then, of course, as in our Pindada, what we're doing to do all this contemplation, we need to look after our Pindada, and to look after our body, we need to eat. That is described as Oshadayaha. Where did the food come from? That was also created by Paramatma. The food has got various, taste, rasas. That is why we make so many dishes and we eat. Even that rasas, those tastes come from Paramatma. Yeah, is what our Angirasa is mentioning or teaching Shuanaka here. So again, in this context, we should never forget this very important verse in Mundaka Upanishad that we saw in the very first Mundaka. Yeah, Yata urnanabihi srujate gruhnate cha Yata pruthivyam oshadayaha sambhavati Yata sataha purushat keshalomani tata aksharat sambhavati iha vishwam. This Vishwam, Iha, this Vishwam, how is that possible? Tata Aksharat Sambhavati Iha Vishwam. Yeah, Angirasa keeps telling us again and again. Yet there are folks who think this world is imaginary and an illusion and a mithya. Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs for some schools, but that is their problem. So let's look at the new verse, new line for today. So what did Angirasa say? He said, Ataha Samudra Girayashta Sarve Asmat Sandante Sindavaha Sarvarupaha Atashta Sarva Voshadayo Rasashta. So all these things have been created, isn't it? So we did touch upon this last time. So just to get the bearings here again. So this creatorship of Brahman, if you look at the creatorship of a potter and creatorship of Brahman of the universe, they're slightly different. Okay? So the potter is sitting here, he is using a clod of clay, he's spinning this wheel, and he's making various stuffs. Could be the pot, the plates, the small cups, and vessels, and so on and so forth he is making. Okay. But the key point there is all these things that the potter has created from the clod of clay is external to him. Okay. It is external to him. Whereas Paramatma's creatorship is different. If this is Brahman who's using Mula Prakriti to create various components of the universe, not only the Jadas, these individual parts are the Jivas. Jivas with their bodies can be considered as individual parts. Even that is created by Paramatma, but he is not external to it. He's actually not only created them, but he is also inside them, says the Taittiriya Upanishad. So akamayat bahusyam prajaye iti satapo atapyata satapastaptva idam sarvam asrujata. Yadidam kincha tat srishtva tadeva anupravishata. Whatever the Brahman has created, tat eva anupravishata. Anupravishata means he pervades into it. Okay, that's a very, very key idea of creatorship of Brahman. So this particular Upanishad, just to remind you, is not only talking about all the things that Brahman has created, but it also gives you ideas about what is the creatorship of Brahman actually, how do we understand that creatorship of Brahman? And this Taittiriya Upanishad gives us a good clue there. Tadeva anupravishat. Okay. So that is exactly what our Angirasa is saying. After having said all these things have been created, he is giving us a very, very important point, which is what I want to focus on the first half of today's Chintana. Yena esha bhutaihi tishtatehi antara atma. Yena esha bhutaihi tishtate. He sits very close with them. Yeah. After creating all this, tishtate, bhutaihi tishtate. Okay. So, yena esha bhutaihi tishtate. Let's look at this bhutas. We are all very familiar with bhutas. Bhutas means they can be jadas, panchabhutas, everything that comes out from panchabhuta and is jada or insentient are also called bhutas. But primarily, bhutas also mean the jivas. Jivas are the bhutas, bhutaganas, the groups of jivas. They are called bhutas because they have a capacity to elevate themselves. Okay. So in both these categories, but at the end of the day, this is what the world is, isn't it? So this bhuta, there is one bhuta called the Mahat Bhutam. Eko Vishnuhu Mahat Bhutam. Then there are other bhutas. What are the other bhutas? Jada bhutas and the Jiva bhutas. But there is the Mahat Bhutam. So there are the only three components of all of existence, if you think about it. And that Mahat Bhutam gets into these Jada bhutas and Jiva bhutas and looks after them. Okay. So that is why our Angirasa says here, he gets inside them as how? As their Antaratma. Okay. Yena esha bhutaihi tishtatehi Antaratma. Okay. So let us look at this Antaratma a little bit in detail because it's a very important concept of Vedic philosophy of Antaratma. What is that Antaratma actually means? Let's look at some beautiful Vedic verses first before we go into the nitty-gritties of it. The same Taittiriya Upanishad says, Yaschayam Purushe Yaschaso Aditye Sa Ekaha. Yascha Ayam Purushe, that one that is inside me, very close to me, and Yaschaso Aditye, that one that is there in the Aditya, in the sun, Saha Ekaha, is the same person. Okay? Not only the Brahmanda, but also inside me is the same person, says Taittiriya Upanishad. Okay? Narayana Sukta of Yajurveda says, Antar Bahishta Tat Sarvam Vyapya Narayana Stitaha. That this Narayana entity is everywhere. Antaha and Bahishta, okay, is the situation of Narayana. And in fact, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad goes on and talks about this very, very clear statements. I don't know how some schools can forget or conveniently forget these verses. Tasya Upanishad Ahariti. Tasya Upanishad Ahamiti. Okay. Brihadaranyaka talks about these ideas. Who is Ahar? Who is Aham? Okay. So this Aham and Ahaha, okay, are the names of Paramatma. Okay. That is one of my key. I hope today I'm able to convince and pass on that information. So when the Upanishad says Aham or the Upanishad says Ahaha, who is that? Who is that Aham? That Aham is the Antaryamin that Angirasa is talking here. Yena esha bhutaihi tishtatehi Antaratma. That Antaratma is the Antaryamin who is celebrated as Aham in the Upanishads. Okay. So we will think about how is that all feasible. So when Angirasa says Antaryami, so I just want to open it up a little bit before we go to the next section of philosophy of Antaryamitva. So what is our understanding of what this Antaryamin is? So who wants to share their ideas here about who the Antaryamin is?
I will try, Nasunavare.
Prakash.
Antaha Stitva Yamayati. That is one who being inside Yamaya control. So one who resides inside us and then controls us. That is the literal meaning of Antaryamitva.
Beautiful, Prakashi. Thank you very much. Perfect, perfect. So, if you want to understand in all its glory what the Antaryamitva is, I would also urge you to look at Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and we have kind of touched upon this on a number of times. Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that actually gives a whole-scale discussion of how to understand Antaryamin. Who is the cosmic sutra and who is the Antaryamin? So this is the discussion here. Vetanutvam kapyatat sutram yena ayam chalokaha parashtalokaha sarvani cha bhutani sandrubdani bhavantiti. That is the question. Okay. So first question is, who is the sutra? Who is the one that holds the whole thing, the whole universe together? Okay. So we don't have time to go through the whole detail, but I'm just giving you an introduction here. Please go and check out the Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Okay, where this is the question. Who is the first cosmic sutra? Okay. Sahovacha Vayur vai Gautama tat sutram, says Yajnavalkya. Vayuhu Vayur vai Gautama tat sutram. It is the Vayu that holds the entire universe under his control. Okay, that is called Vayu Kurma. Some of you may know this whole universe. Then you have the Kurma. Then you have the Sesha who holds the whole of the universe. The Sesha is held by Vayu Kurma. Sahovacha Vayur vai Gautama tat sutram. Okay. Then the question there is, who is holding Vayu? Yeah. Yeah. So that is the next question. Yajnavalkyan Antaryaminam Bruhiti. Who is that one that is controlling Vayu here? So that opens up this whole concept of the cosmic Antaryamin over 23 verses of Antaryami Brahmana of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So when Angirasa says, Enaisha Bhutaihi Tishtatehi Antaratma, let us not forget about the cosmic Antaryamin that is being discussed in the Antaryami Brahmana of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So 23 verses, we don't have time to go through all the 23, but because we are doing Bhuta, Yena Esha Bhutaihi Tishtatehi Antaratma, Yaha Sarveshu Bhuteshu Tishtan Sarvebhyo Bhutebhyo Antaraha Yam Sarvani Bhutani Naviduhu Yasya Sarvani Bhutani Shariram Yam Sarvani Bhutani Antaro Yamayati Yeshata Atma Antaryami Amrutaha. One of the most profound statements of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that talks about this. And Prakashji very beautifully gave us the etymology of who that Antaryamin is. So look at all these verses. Yeshata Atma Antaryami Amrutaha. There are three words there that we need to understand. Atma there means my master, my governor. Antara, Yamayati, he separates from this Jiva, Yamayati governs, independent. Yamin, one who governs, he is eternal and deathless. So that is the philosophy there. So that discussion of Yajnavalkya is very clear. It is the Vayu or the Matarishwa or the Pranatattva that holds the whole universe, and inside him is the Antaryamin, who is described here by Yajnavalkya in the Antaryami Brahmanam of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So who wants to go for Gita 7.7, which also touches upon a similar idea? So may I invite one of you to recite this Gita 7.7, please.
I can.
Okay, go for it, Panagaji. Yeah.
Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam proktam sutre manigana iva.
Thank you very much. Very beautifully recited. So look at that verse. Everything is under my control. I'm holding this universe like a thread. Protam sutre manigana here. So when you look at this sutra, yes, Krishna is the sutra, but also you need to bring in the Antaryami Brahmanam, where in this verse, there is a discussion about Vayurvai Gautama Tat Sutram, and that sutram is under control of this independent sutram called Krishna or Paramatma. So beautiful, beautiful idea. So then there is a question, because there's two words here, Atma and Antaratma, and we keep getting this in our Upanishads. Atma and Antaratma. So I just wanted to open it up today and then have a discussion about what do we think then if as Prakashji says, Antaratma is one that is inside and it is controlling and it's an independent being, then what is Atma in the Vedic philosophy? Is Atma something else? So what is Atma and Antaratma primarily in Vedic philosophy? So what is our view in the Satsang group today? Who wants to go first? We know what Antaratma is. What is Atma? Anandji.
I'll try, Badaji. Atma could mean a number of things. Atma can be body, Atma can be mind, Atma can be soul, Atma can be God.
Beautiful, beautiful, Anandji. So it all depends on the context, right? Where we have to understand Atma and Antaratma. So I just want to remind you in Katha Upanishad, we did Hamsa Gayatri. Remember Hamsa Gayatri, very, very important. Again, talks about Antaryamitva of Paramatma in various entities. Hamsat Suchishad, Vasu Antarikshasad, Hota Vedishad, Atiti Rudronashad, Drishad, Varashad, Rutashad, Vyomashad, Abja, Goja, Adrija, Ritaja, Ritam, Brihat. Beautiful verse of Katha Upanishad that takes 18 entities and says this Paramatma inside all these 18 sentient entities. Okay. And the same Katha Upanishad also talks about, and this is a good point for us to take up for discussion today, talks about this Katha Upanishad verse, which we are very familiar. Ritam pibantau sukrutasya loke guham pravishtau parame pararde chaya tapo brahmavido vadanti panchagnayo yecha trinachiketaha. So you may remember this particular verse. Ritam pibantau. There are two entities that are there that are enjoying, says Katha Upanishad. Brihat Samhita then goes and gives you a a definition. So Anandji gave us a beautiful introduction to what that Atma and Antaratma primarily means in the Upanishad. Okay, Atma Antaratmeti Harireka Eva Dvida Stitaha. Nivishto Hridayam Nityam Rasam Pibati Karmajam. So Atma and Antaratma primarily in the Upanishads mean only the Supreme Brahman. Two aspects of Supreme Brahman, Atma and Paramatma. Hari, that is Hari himself in two forms. Okay. So how do you reconcile this? So we will have to go to our basics here. So we are the Jivas. Inside us, we think is this Antaryamin, which Prakashji told us about who this Antaryamin is, who may be inside the Jivas. But what about the material koshas that the bodies have? Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Manonmaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, and Anandamaya kosha. Okay. So the philosophy there in the Taittiriya Upanishad is that in these 5 koshas are the 5 aspects of Paramatma, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, Vasudeva, Narayana. After all, he is all pervasive everywhere, isn't it? So that pervasive aspect of Paramatma in the material aspect of our body, our Pindanda, is called Atma. And when he is inside the Jiva, that is called Antaratma. So there are 2 aspects that is described in Katha Upanishad, Rutam Pibantau. And there is a whole lot of discussion in the Vedanta Sutra about this. Check this out. So the Atma and Antaratma, we need to be very clear because the Atma there primarily means God in the Paramamukya Vritti. And of course, as Anandji mentioned, it can also mean Jiva, it can also mean mind, it can also mean the body. But when Upanishad says Atma, it is Paramatma. When the Upanishad says Antaratma, it is Paramatma. The Jiva as an Atma has to be qualified in certain situations only, but should not be taken as a generic meaning from the Upanishad's perspective. Okay. So here is an interesting point. So the reason why I had to give you all this information is in the Prathama Kanda, in this particular Kanda of the second Mundaka, Angirasa is given a whole lot of discussion about the creatorship of the universe. Okay. So there is a particular school called the Mayavada school. Yeah. Which has started with the theory that the world is an illusion. God never created the universe. Okay. So this is a fact of that school of philosophy. Whether we like it or not, that is the foundation from which that whole philosophy has been built up, starting with the premise that this universe is mithya. Okay. Then the question arises, but Angirasa in the Atharva Upanishad is talking about Antaryamitva, that this Brahman is inside all creation. Okay. So the question there arises is then how do you reconcile? How can certain schools think about the world as a mithya? So the issue there is Antaryamitva is not a superimposition. Because from a Mayavada school, for example, this universe is a superimposition on this rope. If the rope is considered as Brahman, the universe is a superimposition on the rope. Okay. Here is a critical problem of the Mayavada school, which still doesn't have an answer. Rope is not the Antaryamin of the snake. Okay. If the snake is the universe and the rope is Brahman, it is just a superimposition. The rope is called the Adhisthana and the snake is the Aropya. Okay. It is not an Antaryamin equation. This is an important problem for the Mayavada school, which they have not answered when you look at the creatorship of Brahman that is discussed in the Upanishad. Yeah. So I hope you are able to grasp that idea that rope is not the Antaryamin of the snake. As the Vivartavada, the creatorship of the universe is just a superimposition. It is called Vivarta. It is actually not creation. It is just a superimposition that just happens on Brahman. Okay. So we need to dissect this out clearly so that we understand what is the language of the Angirasa in the Upanishad and what are the languages of certain schools of philosophy that start with a hypothesis which is on a shaky foundation. So they would say this world is Maya or Avidya or Sadasat Vilakshana. Okay. The world is Mithya made. It doesn't come from Mula Prakriti, which actually really exists. This is Sadasat Vilakshanam. It is called Mithya. It is not Sat. It is not Asat. It is not Sadasat, but it is Sadasat Vilakshanatvam. Okay. So you may want to think about this. I mean, my intention is not to go through this in detail, but just want to give you the idea that Antaryamitva does not mean Adhisthana. Okay, that is not the language of Angirasa. Some people may want us to believe so, but it is 100% not the language of Angirasa. Okay, so this is problematic. So again, the reason why we have to do this is we need to understand the right approaches and not so right approaches. After all, in Ishavasya Upanishad, what did we say? We said, Avidyam cha vidyam cha estam veda ubayam saha avidyayam mrityum tirtva vidyayam abrutam ashnute. Okay? We need to know what is the right knowledge, and we also need to know what is the wrong knowledge. And knowing what is wrong knowledge is also true knowledge. And you know what is wrong and you know what is right, there are benefits to it. What is that? From knowing what is wrong knowledge, you can get rid of samsara. But knowing what is right knowledge, you can actually attain eternal bliss, says Ishavasya Upanishad. So it is important. Wherever we do the Upanishads, we need to understand what is the wrong knowledge and what is the right knowledge. If this world is sadasad vilakshanatvam, okay, that is some category of reality to this world that comes from avidya, then Acharya and Anuvyakyana asks a key question where there is still no answer. Asad vailakshanyam gyaptaihi jnatavyam asadevahi. Okay, what does that mean? So our Mayavada philosopher says this world is not sat. This world is not asat also. Okay, so Acharya there asks a very simple question. If the world is not asat, then you need to know what asat is first. Then only you can say that it is different from asat. Yeah. But the Mayavada school says asat chet na pratiyete. Asat can never be brought into purview of knowledge. So this is a discussion. The reason why I say this is the one verse, asad vailakshanyam gyaptehi jnatavyam asadevehi, that made Shobana Bhatta in Godavari Tirtha. Shobana Bhatta could not answer this question. And then he falls at Acharya's feet. And then he becomes one of the greatest philosophers of Tattvavada. Okay, the world is also not sadasat. Okay, it is not sadasat vilakshana. It is not sadasat vilakshana as well. Anirvachaniya siddher aprasiddha visheshanaha. Okay, if sadasat vilakshana is called anirvachaniya, if you say it is there is no evidence in the Vedas. Anirvachaniya siddher aprasiddha visheshanaha. Satraividyam chamanena siddhyate keneti pruchyate. Anuvyakyana. If you are saying there are three classifications of reality, where on earth is the evidence in the Vedas? Okay. Satraividyam chamanena siddhyate keneti pruchyate. No answer. Just an airy-fairy foundation built on some shaky philosophies with no evidence from the Vedas. Yet we don't question this. We just think that this is very amazing and we just clap our hands and say, what an amazing theory here. No, we need to dissect this out carefully and see what is it that Atharva Veda is saying. What is it Atharvana Upanishad is saying? It is saying Antaryamin. He is inside. If something is inside, then that object in which this is there should also exist. So only when the world exists, then there is a question of something going inside. If the world itself is mithya, then what is the point in describing this as antaryamitva? So we just need to think about it. And the same, of course, is the jivas also. And that also becomes important because Prakash ji today mentioned antaryamin means that he is inside the jivas. But from a Mayavada school, there is no that concept of actually Brahman inside the jivas because Atma cha Brahma. They've said Brahman himself is Jiva. Jiva himself is Atma. So where on earth is a question of Antaryamitva there? So these are all problematic from the language of Atharvana Upanishad. Okay. So how does that equation operates in Mayavada? Let's think about this. So there is this guy called Nirguna Brahman who is an absolute zero, useless, doesn't know he exists, no qualities. I don't know why he is there. He is zero, Shunya. Okay. And that fellow has a superimposition of avidya and he becomes Saguna Brahman, which is Krishna of Bhagavad Gita. And then further avidya, then that becomes jivas. Okay. So where is Antaryamitva here in jivas, in Mayavada? Absolutely not. So we need to be thinking about these problems of Upanishads, how to understand the language of the Upanishads. Yeah. So the concept of Antaryamitva is unsustainable in Mayavada is the view here. Open for discussion, but we are thinking about the language of Angirasa here. So there is no Antaryamitva in Mayavada. There is no Antaryamitva tat srishtva tadeva anupravishate of Taittiriya Upanishad, that cannot be fitted into this in Mayavada equation. Okay, so let's not waste too much into this concept. I'll just skip this. I think we have discussed enough just to bring home the truth that world's mithyatva or unreal is problematic. Okay, and also the fact, how can Brahman have avidya on him? Yeah. Our Mayavada philosophers have not given an answer to it. They think it's a fancy philosophy, an idea. Perfectly fine. It's a great idea. But can we prove that in the Vedas? Yeah. So that is what we are talking about, isn't it? If you're a Vedantist, you have to see evidence in the Vedas. Where in the Vedas does it say that Brahman is superimposed with avidya? Yeah. Let us take this equation here, 5 minutes before we go to the next slide. Ignorance is external to Brahman. Okay. Brahman is non-material. We accept that. It is self-luminous. We accept that. The problem here is, how can ignorance penetrate its inner core and lead to Brahman's ignorance of its existence and its non-difference from Jiva, which are still to come into existence? Okay. So here is the problem with this theory. So if Brahman is this red blob here, who is self-luminous, and avidya is superimposing on him, and this avidya then becomes the material world, and this avidya then leads on to Saguna Brahman and the Jivas, here is the problem. Ignorance is external to Brahman. Ignorance cannot penetrate into Brahman, because Brahman is self-luminous, that everybody accepts, and he is absolute consciousness. How can ignorance penetrate into Brahman? Okay. Brahman is partless, he is akhanda. So where does Ajnana cover or penetrate? Brahman should always know it is Brahman. There should be no ignorance that it is Jivas here. Okay. Another important problem, if this Brahman is Nirguna Brahman, what is being covered? When there is only something that has a quality, then you cover it. When something is Nirguna, what is it that you're going to cover anyway? So these are all the problems of avidya that we need to think about, because vidyancha avidyancha yastam veda ubayang sava. Yeah, that avidya there, Ishavasya Upanishad talking about is false knowledge. Yeah. So think about that. Avidya is jada, it's non-sentient. It cannot have an independent ability to self-initiated action. So the problem there, how can avidya cover Brahman on its own accord? How can avidya generate a diverse, well-orchestrated universe, as Brahman is not a creator in monism, because it's vivarta? Okay. The question of Jiva arises only after the superimposition of ignorance on Brahman. Okay. Where did this avidya come from? When did it cover Brahman? Did it cover part of Brahman or all of it? When it is removed, what is the guarantee that it will not cover again? No answers. But these are all the questions that the philosophers asked that need an answer, because the creation of the world has been proposed as avidya. Somehow this avidya, which is mithya, which is anirvachaniya, somehow has become the universe. Yeah. This reduces Brahman to a position of helpless submission to its own ignorance. Okay. This does not glorify Brahman as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes and no defects. This concept has actually downgraded Brahman into somebody who is inert with no qualities, and worse, he gets covered by ignorance himself. Okay, that does not elevate Brahman, which is discussed in the Shastras so much. So these are all the problems. Okay. So yo aso purushaha, so ahamasmi, says that Isha Upanishad. So that aham, then the problem there is, how do you reconcile that aham that is discussed in the Upanishads? So I have a question here. What does aham actually mean? Who wants to come here and share their thoughts? If all that I've said is actually true, then the Upanishads also say aham, isn't it? Aham, who is this aham? So who wants to share their ideas here first?
Okay.
The one discarded is aham. Remember you telling what's mentioned.
Yeah. Thank you, Pratibhaji. So we'll go to Prakash and come to Anand.
Okay, so aham is basically in Brihata Upanishad itself, Acharya gives that ahetvat aham, meaning without that we cannot even exist. So aham means that is God. That is, without him we cannot exist. That is why ahetva. So that is what aham means. So aham means God. That's what is the meaning.
Beautiful, Prakash. Thank you very much. Anand?
I agree with both the explanations. Aham is also the name of the God, as is Asmi.
Fantastic, great. So we all agree on this one. So aham is not I, is not me. Okay. I am the fact that I exist because that aham Paramatma is inside me. That is why I get the I-ness. But it is primarily the aham who is there. So I just want to spend some time talking about this aham because it's important. Because I don't think we should waste any opportunity to discuss this aham, because aham is antaryamin. Yeah. When Angirasa says antaryamin, that is aham. And aham comes in Upanishads in various places. So Isha Upanishad, I have said this, yo asau purushaha, so aham asmi. Yo asau purushaha. So we don't have time to discuss all this. Go to that Upanishad, but he says he is there everywhere. Saha aham asmi. He is aham asmi. Not I am that person. He is aham asmi. Yeah. Tasya Upanishad ahariti. Tasya Upanishad ahamiti. Aitareya Upanishad also talks about this. Sa eva sahovacha tvam eva janiyamiti tam indra uvacha prano va ahamasmi. So this ahamasmi comes in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and in Aitareya Upanishad and in Chandogya Upanishad. And again, as Prakashji mentioned, it comes beautifully in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Okay. And let me just spend 10 minutes briefly talking about it, because we can spend a whole session talking about this. But this is one of the issues of, when I talked about the previous, how can Brahman become Jiva with the superimposition of avidya and etc., etc. So some of the philosophers on the other schools, they take this verse, Brihadaranyaka, say it says Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, it says, see, there it's saying Aham Brahmasmi, so it has to be true. Aham Brahma Asmi, I am Brahman, it is saying. Are you not seeing that? Is what some of the philosophers say. Aham Brahmasmi. Okay. But what have they done? They've just plucked this from this whole context in which Brihadaranyaka Upanishad appears. They've just plucked this word and they said, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi. No, that is not how other schools look at Brihadaranyaka Upanishad verse, which is a very important verse. And how do you read Upanishads? First thing you think about is, does it talk about material entities or non-material entity? No, it is talking about non-material entities. So Vedas are evidence. Is this a Savakasha Shruti or a Niravakasha Shruti? This clearly is a Savakasha Shruti. It is not a Niravakasha Shruti. It has got there are different interpretations that are possible. Then if different interpretations are possible, then what is the Tatparya Lingas by which you have to look at it? So there are all these rules of interpretation. Without going into any of this, it doesn't make sense to just pluck up those three words and they say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Jiva is Brahman, I am Brahman, hey, great, I am the universe, I am the creator of the universe. People are entitled to live in their world of delusions. But Vedas are very clear with regards to what is it that the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is saying. To understand this, I would kindly request our other school philosophers to go into the very previous line. Tad ahuhu brahma vidyaya sarvam bhavishyanto manishya manyante kimu tad brahma aved yasma tat sarvam bhavat iti. Go and find that question first. They have not even touched upon this line, but just they're flaunting Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi. It makes me very sad, but I think it needs to be said. What is the previous line saying? Tad ahuhu brahma vidyaya sarvam bhavishyantaha manushya manyante kimu tad brahma aved yasma tat sarvam abhavat iti. So there the Rishi is asking a beautiful question. How did Brahman became Brahman? And this is a beautiful question to ask. That is the question. Say for ordinary folks like you and me, we have to learn something, right? To elevate ourselves, to get the knowledge. We have to learn something. We have to make an effort and learn. And then we can become great beings. We become rishis or whatever. And the Rishi here is asking, how did Brahman become great? Did he also have to go to a school and learn and then become Brahman? Answer comes immediately. Brahma va idamagra asi tadatmanam eva avet aham brahmasmi iti tasmat tat sarvam abhavat tad yoyo devanam pratyabhudyata sa eva tadabhavat tata rishinam tata manushyanam tad etat pashyan rishihi vamadeva pratipede aham manuhu abhavam suryascha iti Tadidam api etarhi evam veda aham brahmasmi iti sa idam sarvam bhavati. tasya hana devashtana bhutya ishata atma hi esha samabhavati atayo anyam devatam upaste anyo asau ahamasmi iti nasaveda yata pashuhu sadevanam, and it goes on. So this particular verse talks about aham brahmasmi 3 times. And then there is a question before, how did Brahman become great? Okay, so that is the context. So I would kindly request you, when any of the folks of, when our Mayavada philosophers talk about aham brahmasmi, perhaps maybe we have to ask them, what is the context? What is the question that has brought about this discussion? Please may you explain that, rather than just taking these 3 words and flaunting an airy-fairy philosophy with no foundation. I think that's a perfectly reasonable question for the deep thinkers of philosophy to ask. And the answer is very clear, because the concept of aham is a very ancient concept. Okay? Saha, aham, asmi. So Prakash ji and Anand ji and Pratibha ji so beautifully mentioned what is the etymology of aham. Aham cha asau aheyataha. Heya means hatum yogyam heyam. Heyam means that which can be discarded. Hanyamanatvat ham, that which can be discarded is aham, is ham. Aheyatvat means that which cannot be discarded. That which is inside you as your antaryamin can never be discarded. Jiva, you and me as jivas, we have this antaryamin inside us called Paramatma. We cannot discard him. He is always there with us. Okay, whether we like it or not, he is always with us. He is aheyatvat. That is why he is aham. That aham is the antaryamin. Okay. Our antaryamin is undiscardable. That is the view there of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, not I am Brahman. Okay. So the view there is that Brahman knows himself as undiscardable in the universe, and he knows himself as Brahman, or the abode of infinite auspicious attributes, eternally. There was never a point that Brahman was not full of infinite auspicious attributes. And he always knew that he is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes, and he is undiscardable. That is the meaning of aham brahmasmi. Aham brahma asmi, not I am Brahman. Aham is a secret, sacred name of God, as we all agree in this satsang. So what is asmi then means? Asmi means sarvada asti iti meyam. Brahman always knows or conscious of its eternal existence and perfection. He always knows. He didn't go to a school and learn and then he became perfect. He is always perfect. That is the meaning of aham. And the reason why this aham is important in Vedic philosophy is, this is an ancient concept in many of the ancient religions of the world. And we have done this before, but beautiful ideas that we should discuss again. Look at Judaism in Old Testament, Exodus. And Moses said unto God, behold, when I come into the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, the God of your father hath sent me unto you. And they shall say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? Asks Moses when he sees the fire in that bush in Egypt. So Paramatma there says, and God said to Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thou shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you, says the Torah. And the Hebrew word for this is Ehe, Esher, Ehe, is what Paramatma tells Moses. Tell them, I am, my name is Aham. Aham has sent me to you. So that Aham is the I am of the Vedic philosophy. Aheya, look at these sounds. Ehe and Aheya, they sound very similar. Even the sounds of the words are very similar from ancient schools of philosophy. Look at Zoroastrianism. Okay. There is a conversation with Zarathustra, the big rishi, the saint of Zoroastrianism. Ahura Mazda is the name of their Paramatma, and he is asking this question. Tell me then, O pure Ahura Mazda name, the name by which thy greatest, best, fairest, and which is the most efficacious for prayer. Thus answered Ahura Mazda, my first name is Ahmi. I am, and my 20th name is Ahmi Yad Ahmi Masdo. I am that I am. Avesta, Zen Avesta. That also says, I am, Aham. Aham is the name of me, says Ahura Mazda. He teaches Zarathustra. Very similar to how Paramatma teaches to Moses, my sacred name is Aham. Okay. That is the Vedic philosophy of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, right? That is what the Vedic philosophy, which is so ancient and eternal, that is what it is saying about Aham. Yeah, let us not make that fundamental mistake of assuming Aham Brahmasmi is I am Brahman. No, it is a concept of philosophy across the world. Aham is the secret name of Paramatma. Let us not delude ourselves that we are Paramatma, is my humble submission today. So why we are doing all this? Yena, Esha, Bhuta, Tishtate, Hi Antaratma. This Antaratma is what is being discussed here. Tadeva Anupravishati is what is being discussed. Who is the Aham? Who is the Antaryamin? Yashta Ayam Purushe. Yashta, so Aditye Sa Ekaha. That Aham is the Antaryamin. Okay, that Aham Brahmasmi is not I am Brahman. It is that understanding that Brahman always knew that it is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes, and he is undiscardable in all the Jagat Vyapara Varjan. Okay? So that is how we have to read the Vedanta Sutras, Vedas and the Upanishads, not delude ourselves that I am God. Okay? So whilst we are doing all this, I've also got another ideas here. I'm going to skip the previous slide, and then in want of time, I'm going to just deal with this. Okay. So then it's all well and good saying that it is not possible for Brahman to be superimposed by Avidya or penetrate into Avidya, and that becomes Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman, and we have kind of had that discussion before, and it makes a shaky foundation. Then the question is, how can, in the context of jivas, how can ignorance penetrate its core and lead to ignorance of its inherent nature and presence of independent Antaryamin? Mayavada philosophers can challenge the realistic philosophers with that question. How is that possible? Your jiva is also self-luminous. Your jiva cannot, how can the jiva ignorance penetrate into the core of the jivas? Okay. Jiva knows it exists. Jiva knows it's conscious. Jiva knows it's the experiencer. Jiva knows it's the doer. The jiva's ignorance is that it thinks it is an independent doer and an experiencer. And with its ignorance, it is attached to this material world and then going through samsara. This jiva does not know the supreme who is his Antaryamin, and does not know its dependence to its Antaryamin, does not know its full nature. And at this point, because it's of its sad situation, it does not experience bliss or the Swarupa Ananda. Why? Because the Paramatma has made it so as an Antaryamin, because the Paramatma wants the jiva to actually go through samsara, do this examination, and then reach him and see him, which is what the next verse is. And the reason why I brought this in is, in the next kanda, in the next Mundaka, first kanda, Avishaha. So it talks about why is Paramatma inside the jiva in the first place. That is another core philosophy. If Antaryamitva is Aham, is Paramatma, the question there is, why on earth should this Brahman even bother to get inside the jiva and exist there? Yes, we know to maintain their reality, to give them their volition, to make them an objecthood of knowledge and so on. But it is all just to it, or is it something else? So we will deal with that at that section. But I just wanted to introduce this idea that Paramatma ensures that this is the position in which the jiva has to find their salvation. And he does this through his omnipotency or Achintya Adbhuta Shakti. That is the answer to that. Our Paramatma is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes made. He is not some zero, shunya. He is so powerful, omnipotent, he can do whatever he wants. And this is the system he has done. Anadi mayaya shuptaha yada jivaha prabudyate ajam anidram aswapnam advaitam buddhyate tada. Even this verse has been kind of misinterpreted, I would say, in some schools. But we have done this Mandukya Upanishad verse that talks about this. So coming back to, I'm also introducing the parrots here, because it's probably been months and months before we spoke about parrots of Mundaka Upanishad, because they are going to come in the next kanda. The Dvasuparana concept is going to come very, very beautifully. This particular jiva, bird, is covered by various types of ignorance, paramachadika, jivachadika, the sense of independence and identifying with the material bodies and so on. So at some point with divine grace, it has to come out of this particular quagmire. Okay? And then to do that, you need to approach a student and understand this philosophy properly, and we will talk about this Anubandha Chatushtaya, a proper student, a qualified student, Vishaya, subject matter that's worth discussing, Prayojana, that fruit that can come with us, the relationship between this, all has to be perfect for philosophical discussion that needs to happen, which is what is going on here between Shuanaka and Angirasa. And the same thing happened with Nachiketa and Yama in the Katha Upanishad, leading on to understanding what is the real position of ignorance and so on. Okay, so hold on to that thought, and I'm just going to recite this verse and close today's session, because this is the last verse of this particular khanda. Purusha eva idang vishwam karma tapo brahma paramrutam yetad yo veda nihitam guhayam so avidya grantim vikirati iha somya. So all those avidya stuff that comes here that I'm talking about is this that is being discussed here. That is why I have this introductory slides. Is the last slide is very, very important in my view, because the first 9 slides, the 9 verses in Angirasa is discussed about all the great things that Paramatma does in creating this universe, that he is inside, he is the Antaryamitva, that he is creating. Okay. Here is a very, very important philosophy that Angirasa is going to be talking to us in the next session. How do we understand that creatorship of Paramatma? Yes, he is creating everything, but he is doing some actions, isn't it? Creatorship means he is doing some actions. Okay. Is his actions different from him? For us, for example, we are here, we are the soul, we are inside, but we are doing actions with our body. We are using actions with our body, which is different from us. What about for Paramatma? How does he doing all this? Purusha, for that Angirasa answers, Purusha eva idam vishwam karma tapaha. He is Brahma. He is para amruta. Yeah, these are very, very important lines. And he says, he who knows this, yetat yo Veda. What does he know? Nihitam guhayam. He who is in that this Paramatma, this great fellow is actually inside the Jiva as Antaryamin. Yetat yo Veda nihitam guhayam. What happens to him? So, avidya grantim, the knot of ignorance, vikirati, is taken away. Iha, right now. Somya, he says, Angirasa to Shuanaka. Okay. So what we will do is in the next session in the Chintana, we will take up this verse. I think today's session was a little bit heavy going with various philosophies, but I think it's very, very important for us to understand. Aham is Antaryamin, he is Aheya. Okay. Aham Brahmasmi does not mean I am Brahman. No, it just means Brahman always knew he is perfect and he is undiscardable for everything in the universe, and he knew that always. That is the meaning of Aham Brahmasmi. Let us not be under the delusion that we are Brahman. Okay, that will be our downfall. Okay, on that note, I want to close today's session and we will take up any discussion or questions that